Hi, this is Amelia Vogler, a specialist in energy medicine, and your host today for the Energy Magazine exclusive interview series. And I am so excited to have Melinda Chichester with me today. Melinda is a Healing Touch certified practitioner. She's a qualified mentor. She's also an end-of-life doula. Melinda has a focus to release trauma within the human energy system while supporting people's life's journey and end-of-life journey. Melinda supports the energy community by empowering advanced practitioners to continue their professional development in the field of energy medicine and with the human energy system. Melinda is a death educator and a public speaker. She focuses on the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual and energetic aspects of death and dying. She's published in multiple e-periodicals, the American Holistic Nurses Association, Energy Magazine, Sybil Magazine. And despite this, in addition to this wonderful list of accomplishments, I have a personal relationship with Melinda. She and I went through our Healing Touch training together. We were level 4 roommates in Corryville, Pennsylvania. So I don't know how many millions of years ago that was. But Melinda, it's so great to get to talk to you in this format. And it's just amazing how lives ebb and flow and we find our way back to each other along the way. So welcome.
Thank you, Amelia. You know, if I could kind of add on to your story, when we were rooming together, I love to work with ruin cards, you know, on a more of a personal. So I happened to bring them and drew a few cards for your journey, right? And that is the image that comes up when we contact or the phone rings, right? So it's just, I remember that moment. How many years ago, right? And so I do. It's been wonderful to watch your journey, Amelia, and it's just been great that you've been able to support mine. So,
this is going to be the most fun interview. I hate to say that to all the other interviews, but I've been really excited about this one, and I know that the folks watching are really going to enjoy hearing about your life and your journey with this really exceptional work. So I'm going to throw us right in. Speaking of the personal, in 1992, I know that something happened to you and it changed your life forever.
Yes. My first marriage, my husband and I were living in Pennsylvania, and his aunt was diagnosed with brain cancer, and then it metastasized, breast cancer, and then it metastasized to brain cancer. And I wanted to bring her and her sister. They were they never married, they lived together. They were in their 70s, I think. And I wanted to bring them to our home in order for her to have a gentle passing. And so we called Hospice in, my first experience with it. And the love, the support that we had. I had 2 young babies. They were 4 and 2 running around while I had, you know, a home with the energy of the dying, right? And it was the best moment of my life and also the worst moment of my life. And so at the time of death, her name is Kay. Kay hadn't had anything to drink or eat in days. And the aide there pulled me in and said, Melinda, I think we're close. So went to the bedside, and all of a sudden, of course, a 2 and 4-year-old went absolutely crazy. I didn't care. I was in the moment, standing over this woman, just feeling the awe, I don't even know, the power of this transition. And so, unfortunately, the surviving sister focused more on the children, tried to calm them down, and I stayed there in the room. And in a moment, Kay dropped one tear, and I watched it. It'll get emotional after like 25 years. She dropped one tear, And in that moment, I knew she was thanking me for bringing her there and allowing her to pass, right? And so we went, she died very peacefully. The whole routine of, coming in and removing the body. And then just after that, the surviving sister packed her bag, ran down the stairs, yelled at me that I was the one that killed her sister, left the house, and never spoke to me again. I knew in that moment that I was called to help support those that are left behind, to help them to understand what is happening at the time of death, because I had such a blessing of an experience, right? And it was a couple weeks later, I actually had a visitation. I get quite prophetic dreams. And Kay actually visited me in a dream in my garage.
Mm-hmm.
I could even smell the death and decay in this dream. It was very odd. And she hugged me and thanked me. And ever since that moment, I have known that I needed to work with end of life. I didn't know what it was going to look like. I was still raising babies. And so I just kind of allowed that knowing to just manifest for me. And so it was a pretty powerful experience, let me tell you. It changed me forever.
Wow. And you know what? While you were telling that story, I was just chilled to the bone. Just, I mean, tingles up my back, and just amazing the way that we're called to our work, and how in some ways time is irrelevant, for everybody watching who might be seeking a purpose, or, in the search for the next great thing. It's like time just rearranges everything. It's just not a force that spirit knows to work in a linear way. So I also wanted to just appreciate your patience in receiving the calling, and how beautiful even that as a teaching for others is. So really grateful for your story, and for Kay, and for the children who also had their own part in the story, the way life and death are so close together and we have to reconcile that. Anyway, I'm blabbing on here. And I'm wondering, though, if you wouldn't mind, just for those who are coming to this interview who may not have yet heard of an end-of-life doula, what called you? What is that? What is an end-of-life doula?
Yeah, there's another good story, Amelia. So as you know, Healing Touch, when we're in classrooms, we do introductions to get to know one another. And this was back in 2015. So from 1992, and in 2015 is when I finally had my aha epiphany, right? And so this student came in from Texas. I was living in Colorado at the time. Came in from Texas, started sharing, mentioned that she was a birth doula, which I actually wanted to do that first. But life, after my experience, I knew I was called the other side of life. And so this gal did her intro. She's a birth doula. And then she shared, I also doula end of life. I'm an end of life doula. And every hair on my body stood on end. And I said, that is such a thing. In that moment, I knew that I was going to be an end-of-life doula. I'm Googling like end-of-life doula training. And back then in 2015, there were very few people educating the doulas. And I had found Inelda, one of the top educators out there at the moment. And so I went seeking. At that time, they were doing maybe one class a year. Now they're doing several, I think one every 2 or 3 a month. They've had to shift now with the Zoom type of training now, which is kind of an adjustment. And so just hearing the vocation literally spearheaded me. I knew that that was where I was headed. And so it's a universal calling. I've said this many times, that people are being called to this vocation and they don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are trying to build this awareness of the benefits of a doula, and I might not be answering your question, I hope I am. The awareness of the doula work, right? And so we are in this kind of moment of bringing the doulas into the vocation, but we're having to educate the community on the benefits of it because we have hospice, we have palliative care, and so we're trying to help people to understand a doula's role. How I like to share it is we magnify hospice care. We have to have hospice. They are a primary source, right, for end of life. It's a benefit. People don't understand that this is, you know, part of their Medicare benefit. And so we're still trying to help hospices and palliative cares understand that we bring another level, another part of the team. So what we do is, as doulas, we are the voice of the dying. Mm-hmm. So we get invited in, we start to listen, we assess, we help navigate between medical and non-medical care. I am not a nurse, mm-hmm. and so I bring in my network, my wisdom, my skills, certainly as an energy practitioner, to bring a level of calmness, educating the families on what to expect. I love to bring the energetics of that end of life. And so I help the families to kind of feel comforted. We spend copious amounts of time. So I could spend easily anywhere from 4 to 6 hours with a family or the dying on each visit. Hospice, unfortunately, because it's regulated, are required to check off their boxes in their checklist, right? Saw the patient, did the home care, did the primary care, right? And all these other things. And then they have to move on because their caseloads are so big. And so what I'm trying to help the community understand is when you have that client that just seems to not be able to settle down, to have high anxiety, fear around dying, right? Is there a legacy that they want to help create? That's when you call the doula. I'm trying to kind of capture my own language around being the community doula here in Pennsylvania where I live, right? Every community should have a doula. And so just trying to help people understand that there is another level of care that you can reach out to when hospice, palliative care, the family just isn't quite enough. And I think that's our niche. That's where we kind of plug ourselves in.
It's a beautiful opportunity to create a bridge. And, you know, I'm curious if you wouldn't mind just giving me a couple, and those listening, a couple examples of when you spend 4 to 6 hours with somebody, you know, what is it that you're doing? You know, I'm sure that you're listening, but what are some other tools or processes or, you know, stuff for lack of better words?
I had a recent situation just prior to the COVID where I actually came up with the idea that possibly becoming a parish doula just before COVID hit. So I was working on that aspect of trying to work in my community. And so a few weeks later, I did get a call from the parish that there was a family whose father was transitioning rapidly. He'd been on hospice for months and months and months, doing well. And then all of a sudden he took the turn, and unfortunately the hospice that they chose wasn't responding to the rapid decline of their father. And they were two, young women, didn't quite know what to do, didn't know how to care for their father. And so I was called in, and literally just sitting there and holding, we have a wonderful phrase in Healing Touch where we become a healing presence. Uh-huh. Just being present to the situation, allowing for them to certainly just download anything, any concerns that they have in that moment, right? Not trying to do or say much, just allowing them to kind of share what's going on. And I was able to comfort them and guide them that in that moment, they had the choice to switch hospices. And that is a right in hospice. You can change hospice, you can come on and off again hospice, depending on the care, right? And so through just our quiet conversation, knowing the hospices in my community, that they had a choice. And so it took quite a few hours to help them to navigate that, and then to finally make the call to bring in another hospice. And in that time frame, I'm seeing the patient in a lot of pain. His pain meds weren't helping in this situation. Again, I'm not a nurse. Healing Touch has always taught, or any energy medicine classes I've taken, we've learned about our scope of practice and our code of ethics, right? And so I was helping them to understand that there are other alternatives to help their father, right? So it's a matter of trying to just pull in all the information you can get, helping the patient get comfortable, right? I do have some skills there in turning. It depends on what your skill level is. And so within a very short period of time, they were able to call another hospice who showed up within, I don't know, maybe 3 hours, had a hospital bed, had a morphine pack ready for this man, right? Had oxygen. Like all of a sudden the team came in and just loved on this family. And that's what hospice does. And so I was able to show them or share with them that their hospice, although great while dad's walking around and doing okay, when it came time for that 11th hour, they were being neglected.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, it was really a lovely moment. I'm getting goosebumps even thinking about that one. And so that's just kind of some of the things they do. My work, Amelia, really, I bring so much of the energy aspect.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually told that I needed to try to put that stuff in my toolbox. Just leave that there. Don't lead with that. I don't know. How do you tell Melinda you can't lead, that you're an energy practitioner, right? When I know how much benefit there is to balance, open, and clear the energy system so the body has its ability to do what it needs to do, right, especially at end of life.
Right. And, you know, Melinda, I know, and I think folks will find this very interesting, that you work in the heart, you know, at end of life as well. And the Hara has a very specific role at end of life. And that, you know, I think that might be interesting for you to share with folks if you feel comfortable.
You know, there's a book in me. I know there's a book in me somewhere, but it was what I wrote in the Energy magazine this September, October edition was about a brother and a sister. And it was his name is Gary, and it was this situation that really it highlighted the beauty of horror work. And so this gentleman was in chronic pain, absolutely dying, right? But just couldn't get comfortable, right? There was just so much going on. And I had been a presenter at the Conscious Southern Colorado Living and Dying Conference, where I spoke about Hara and energy medicine and end of life. And a woman was there. She was just hanging on every word, because she was thinking of her brother who was struggling at end of life. And so she contacted me, and through the intake shared with me that her brother had a very traumatic event where his son was murdered. And just that story, I immediately knew that that would affect the Hara, right? Hara holds our karma, contracts our traumas, right? Something he never overcame. And it was through assessment and diagnosis of the Hara that I found his energy system, I don't know quite, I wish there was language we could pull out of the heavens, because it almost as if it wasn't existent. It didn't even exist. There was no flow. There was nothing, no vitality.
Mhm.
And so it was in that moment, he was nonverbal, so he couldn't share anything. And it was through the work of his hara that I was able to bring in that place for him to be comforted, to relax into the dying process. I feel very blessed. I am not one that sees spirit very often, right? As I'm in the energy, especially when in the dying energy, loved ones will come in and give me information, which is, I think, why I love this work even more. And this son came through trying to kind of help with the situation. I know it sounds weird, but by balancing and creating the flow, bringing the vitality back to this man's hara, immediately he was able to get into that state. Also, by increasing medication, making sure that he was comfortable, he was able to allow himself to go into that internal place that the dying needs to go in order to release the physical body. And there was this beautiful moment where his sister was able to see when her brother was on the other side, very angelic, very peaceful. She just knew it. There was something that came over him that she hadn't seen before. And then he would come back into the physical body and just be in, scrunched up and in pain. And so by helping with the energy systems in the hara, it allowed him the ability to do the internal work that's required at that time, right? If the person dying feels the physical body, it is very hard to release the physical body. And so that's what I love about this, is it doesn't mean that these techniques, they're going to die within a minute or two or hour, right? It's about giving them that place to honor the transition that they need to do and not worry about the physical body, right? So just life-changing work.
Beautiful and extraordinary. So you've given us and shared with us a few different stories, from your history, but, I'm wondering if you have some takeaways about, how the dying have impacted you, or what the dying have taught you about living.
Wow. Amelia, that is such a great question. It is showing me how short life is. It is showing me, believe it or not, it's teaching me healthy boundaries, because I, as a nurturer, I tend to give way too much, right? And I have learned, as I've been working with the dying, how special life is. And so I speak more of my truth, although it's getting me into trouble, I have to admit. I love even harder, but I also am not as willing to give of my soul as much, where it affects me, it drains me, it takes away my, I'm going to just say, my own power, my self-esteem, right? And so that is what I'm learning about being with the dying, is how precious life is.
Oh, doesn't that just make you want to cry? It just
kind
of feel like just the tears of the reminder. I grew up in a funeral home, and so death has always been something that we talked about at the dinner table. And when you hear every day, Daddy, who died today? Daddy, who died? How'd they die? It really does make you take every moment of life and wrap it in the preciousness of its essence, and then we get the benefit of walking through it, and together also with other people. So I love that.
Yeah. Can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
And I think It has also blessed me that I have absolutely no fear in this moment. I don't know when I'm approaching death if I'll have a different perspective, but in this moment, I know there is something so much greater on the other side. We don't, the physical body, yes, we leave it however we decide to honor the ceremony around that body in this lifetime is a personal experience, which is also what we do as a doula. We help with funerals and burials, information, right? We're information grabbers, right? We just get all the information we can. And so because I've had so many amazing experiences, so much information that's been gifted to me, I absolutely know that the dying, the souls on the other side are they're impacting our lives here as much as if when they were here, if not more. And I think that's been another great gift, is that, you know what, when my time is coming, I hope I have a celebration and balloons blowing and like, woohoo, I'm on my way, right? Because I've just been blessed to know that they speak to us from the other side all the time. My grandmothers do it. I have one grandmother gifts me with parking spaces. That's how I know she's thinking of me.
How precious.
And the other one gives me pennies, which is very common. So, so they speak to us. And so even just trying to release, I heard this great TED talk, Amelia, a woman who went through her own process with her husband's terminal illness, and the fear around it that people had, like they wanted to avoid the situation. They wanted to tell her he's not dying, right? And she had this philosophy. She had this knowing, what would happen if we treated the dying like we treat birth, as a celebration, right? And I'm getting goosebumps on that one, right? And so if that's really what I want to do, is to help people know that this is such a sacred moment. There's nothing to be afraid of. We all are going to go there. We have to do it, right? And if you're the type of person that is in the driver's seat of your life on this side of, right, of life, you can have that same control, planning, however it is that you want to exit this life. And that is what I'm really hopeful I can do in helping people to understand that it can be I hate to say pleasant journey, but a sacred journey. It is a sacred journey that can be embraced and not feared.
Yeah. Well, and I think also it can be a very peaceful journey. I remember seeing my grandma before she passed. My dad and I had gone over to brush her teeth and sit with her, and we said, Mama, we'll see you tomorrow. And she goes, and she died that night in her sleep.
Wow.
So the vastness of our experiences while we're alive are equal to that. It's just another choice that we can make for ourselves, I think. And finally, we got just a couple minutes left, but I'm wondering about empowerment, because one of the themes that you've talked about, without maybe saying it so much, is that you facilitate helping the patient or the client be empowered. You help their family to be more empowered. So I'm just wondering about, how is it that you conceive of giving the power back to your clients, or putting them in the driver's seat of this precious moment?
Yeah, still another great question. It's about communication.
Mm.
It's about going to those hard places or asking those hard questions. What is, what are your fears about the upcoming process of your loved one dying?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to be there? Asking the dying who they want there. What do they want their environment to look like? creating, the article I wrote was called Soul Sanctuary, because the woman who was supporting her brother wanted his life in a kind of a nursing facility, right? A dementia. He was in a dementia unit. She wanted his room to be his soul sanctuary. And there's a lot of noise and chaos that goes on there. And so she was empowered to create this environment that was sacred and quiet. And for her, I needed to actually, believe it or not, through energy work and doing assessment, I was able to help her to understand that the level of pain he was experiencing was showing up in his energy system. And so I was able to help her to understand, if we can get him comfortable, he's going to be able to kind of go into that internal journey, right? And that was hard for her, because she wanted him attentive no matter how painful, how much pain he was in, right? She wasn't ready to go there. So it was just time, right? Having those kind of conversations, giving them the options and choices that are available to them, because you really do want the family, and or if the person is coherent enough to share, to make those decisions themselves. So we want them to be fully involved with that process as much as they can. And it's, doulas ask the hard questions. We ask a lot of questions because we have the time. Yeah. We're holding that space. And so one thing that I'm getting ready to do once we get past all this COVID is I'm involved with a senior center not far from me. And I'm going to start creating legacy projects with the seniors. So they're going to come in and I'm going to have them magazines, cutouts. We're going to do like a legacy board, and they're going to just create their legacy. And chances are a lot of them really aren't quite sure what that means or what that's going to look like. And so I want them to create images and this story of themselves. They get to take that home with them, stick it in your closet, under your bed. And then when you are in that position of yourself dying, your family finds this, and there's this legacy board that they may never even, I'm getting goosebumps on that one, they wouldn't have even known about, right? So it's really just about bringing language. Communication truly is the key to everything. When we lack communication, or we miss the communication, or we are unable to communicate, is where we have our challenges and our hiccups and stuff. So it really is about bringing all of those hard questions. And I do have to say, hospice does a lot of that. They're phenomenal. Mm-hmm. It's, once you ask the question, can you sit with them while they're processing that answer, right? That's where the doulas come in that processing stage as well. While they're reflecting, they may have a question, right? And so I hope that.
Yeah. No, absolutely, Melinda. This has just been wonderful. And I'm so grateful for your work and for you listening to the calling and answering it. And I also just look forward to continuing to read your articles and hearing about you on the stage. So I wish you so much success. And thanks for your time today, Melinda.
Thank you, Amelia.